Prayer is sometimes hard. It's hard to find the time. It's hard to find the words. And it is a sacrifice to set time aside to pray for the ones we love, let alone to make the time to pray for our enemies. I mean, that's a whole nother level.
Welcome to this episode of The French Press. Let me pour you a cup of coffee while we talk about intrigues of faith, pages we've dog-eared, and the life in between on The French Press.
Hey, thanks for joining me today on The French Press. You can probably hear that I have a cold. I can't hear out of one of my ears and I'm stuffed up, so I sound a little weird. I already really struggle with the sound of my voice. I know that's really common. I think most people do, but it's really amplified when you start a podcast. Isn't it funny how God does that? Kind of takes your insecurities and almost puts them on display sometimes. Maybe so he's like, oh, guess what? It's actually not about you. It's about me. And I can work through all these things, including your voice. But I do apologize for how congested I sound. But my sister challenged me to record every day, even if I don't publish it. So I'm going to record every day and just practice talking on a podcast. And some of these will make it in and some of them won't. And we'll both be surprised if this one makes it in. But I'm going to return to the book that I talked about in the first episode, which was starting today, which is the one I got out of the little free library. And I've made it over halfway through this book, which is also surprising. I didn't think I would stick with it, but I really liked it. And so I've marked up some of the pages that I liked and thought I might want to talk about or share about. And this is actually day 2. So I'm going way back and I'm looking at my notes and things I underlined and thought, yep, this rings true. This is a good topic. This day, he calls it Love Beyond Logic. And he's pulling some verses out of 1 John 4. And he's talking about, well, here's the story that he gives. And I actually have some of my own stories. But he talks about this little girl that was in kindergarten and they're making Valentines for the other kids in the class. And the teacher asked to meet with this little girl's parents. And they tell the parents that they didn't have to make Valentines for everyone in the class. They could just make them for a couple people. And she had chosen to make a Valentine for this one particular kid that had been really mean to her all year. And this kid had gotten in trouble for being mean to her. His parents had been talked to. He'd been punished or kept back from recess and just wouldn't stop. He was just always mean to this little girl. And she had chose to make him a Valentine because she said that if she made him a card, maybe he would be nice to her. And that was sort of her logic, was like, I'll be nice to him and show him that I care enough to make a Valentine. Maybe that'll change the way he looks at me. And so he's likening this to what God does for us, that we're so terrible sometimes in our hearts and in the way we act, in the way we treat other people, or in the way we treat God and think about God or ignore God. And what does he do? He sends his son to die for us and to suffer for us and to take on our sin and our judgment. And I just think that's such an interesting thing. Like, he sends us a Valentine when we're in our worst state, when we're struggling and we're sad and we're depressed and we're angry, in denial of him and who he is. And he makes us a Valentine and sends it and says, I love you. And maybe if you see how much I love you, you'll want to have a relationship with me, which is kind of what this little girl was thinking. If this boy sees I care enough to do this, I still like you, I can love you, maybe it would change his heart. And I'd love to have heard the end of that story if it ever affected that little boy or not. But we certainly know God's sending his son and his sacrifice to make a way for us. We can respond well and say, look at how much he loves us. Or we cannot respond to it, but he did it so we would respond and want to have a relationship with him. And he says in here, are you having a hard time with someone in your life? Maybe a client or a child or an employee. Have you already tried instruction, warning, and punishment? Perhaps it's time to do something radical by imitating this little girl and mostly by imitating God. And I think how countercultural and how upside down it is that we are called to love our enemies. That when people hurt us and abuse us and say bad things about us and go out of their way to be mean to us, that we are actually called to love them. And sometimes it's hard to know what that looks like and how that actually walks out in the physical. If you're anything like me, you're worried about feeling like a doormat. Like, well, I'm not just going to let this person be mean to me and I'm just going to love them. They're going to abuse me and use me and walk all over me. And that's sort of my flesh and my instinct. And certainly there are many times where it would be inappropriate to have contact with people who have abused you and been mean to you. And you would need to just cut ties with them. And that would be the correct thing to do. But kind of in the run-of-the-mill stuff, kind of the average life situations, that is not what we're called to do. We're called to reach out to these people, to make an effort with these people, to basically show them love, right? To show them God's love, to represent God to them. And I'm sure we all have people in our lives that are just really hard. They're really hard people and they are really mean to us and they go out of their way to be mean to us. And to think of like, oh gosh, I should make this person a Valentine. And by Valentine, I mean, show them kindness, be nice to them, even though they're mean to me. It's a really tricky area to navigate and figure out how to respond and what to do. I actually wrote an article about this once, and if I can ever figure out how to make show notes have live links, I will post them. But I have not accomplished that yet. But I did write an article about when my son was little. I think he was like 5-ish. And we were just at a park playing, and I kind of ran into someone I casually knew. So we were talking, and she had an older son. He was probably like 8 or 9. And this boy was kind of being mean to my son. My son was like playing with him, and he had told him his name, and this kid was purposely saying the wrong name, which is just such a silly thing. But of course, that really bothers a 5-year-old, right? A 5-year-old's like, that's not my name, and you're upsetting me, and I'm getting mad. And this kid liked that he was getting mad, so he kept calling him by the wrong name on purpose. It was very benign. It wasn't a big deal. But, in a little 5-year-old's mind, it mattered more. And so when we got in the car, he said to me, like, why wouldn't that boy use my right name? Like, that's not my name. Why was he doing that? And, and I'm like, well, obviously he was trying to bother you. He was trying to kind of be mean to you. And we talked about how in this little tiny box, this was his enemy, right? Not really. I mean, this wasn't a big deal what this kid was doing, but in the little 5-year-old world and mind, it was sort of like, why would this random kid who I've never met, I've never done anything to him, why would he make a point of annoying me like this? And so we talked about how we're to pray for our enemies, actual enemies. So certainly we should pray for this little boy. And so we did. In the car, we just prayed for him, and we prayed that the Lord would bless him. We prayed that he would know the Lord. It was very impactful, I think, on my son's life. It really set a precedence when he was so young of how we would react to, I mean, I won't even call this bullying, but we'll say teasing, but, would react to something that bothers us. And of course, it makes us examine our own lives. It makes me examine my own lives. And when I feel like somebody's like really trying to push my buttons, or they're just kind of being kind of a jerk, my instinct is to defend myself and to maybe be that back. Oh, well, I can have retorts for you, or I can say things behind your back, or whatever it is. But to have the humble heart to pray for them instead is really humbling. And it really gets you like on your knees of like, oh, I desperately don't want to pray for this person. And yet the Bible tells me I'm supposed to. And I'm supposed to teach my children to do this, so I'm supposed to do it. And I'm supposed to mentor and encourage other Christian women to do this, so I better be doing this. And I've been called to pray for people that did not just purposely use the wrong name, but have actually done things that have really deeply hurt me. And I'm sure you have those people or instances in your lives. Maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a family member or even a friend. Those I think actually hurt the worst, right? And that we have to pray for them. And I have found when I pray for them and I think about this topic, I've often wondered if that person needs prayer and that's how God's going to get someone's attention, right? He's going to have that person come up to you, rub against you in a bad way, kind of sandpaper you and rough you up as like an attention getter. Because otherwise, that person would go right under your radar. Now, I have no idea if that little boy needed prayer. Maybe he did. I'll probably never know. But maybe he did. Maybe that little boy, for some reason, needed prayer that day. And because that happened, and we sat in the car and prayed for him, he got prayer. And I've thought that with other people in my life that I've been called to pray for. And I've wondered, like, does this person just need prayer? And this is how God's going to get my attention, because the people aren't going to ask for it, or I would never think about them. But because they annoyed me, I will think about them. But because as a Christian, I have to take the next step and then pray for them, maybe they needed that prayer. And I've had it as simple as somebody cuts you off in the parking lot or steals your parking space. That really gets me. And I'm just like, oh, I'm so mad. I was waiting for that parking spot. How could someone take it? He saw me with my blinker on, that situation. And I've tried, not always clearly, but in my better moments, I have tried to pray for that person. Like, okay, I'm going to pray for that person. And maybe that person needed prayer. And that's how God got my attention, was by having them steal my parking spot, or having them be rude to me in the grocery store or whatever it is. And I found if I can go to that place, and I will admit it's easier with total strangers, right? It's easier for the person who cut you off in line or the woman who said a mean thing to you in the grocery store. They're easier to pray for, frankly, than friends and family. But I found if I can make that the habit, that's where I go. Like, I get mad, I get annoyed, but then this person's like on my radar. And then I'm like, oh, I think I probably have to pray for them. And admittedly, it's a lot harder with people that are in your life, that are constants in your life, like maybe someone that lives in your home or someone you work with and someone you have to see all the time and they annoy you all the time and they're always like rubbing sandpaper on your skin. That's a much harder call to have to pray for that person. And I've heard many stories of people that had those people in their lives and prayed for them for years and years and years before there was any breakthrough, and then that relationship softened or changed or became something different. And it's certainly a harder call and a higher call to do it, I think, for family and friends. I mean, we've probably all had friends that have betrayed us or hurt us or said something behind our back. And you're just like, oh, I'm really mad at you and I don't want to talk to you and I just want to blot you out of my life. Like I said, sometimes that's an appropriate reaction, but maybe you're just supposed to pray for them and have a prayer ministry for them. And you're not actually supposed to say anything. And that's really hard too. I think sometimes you are supposed to talk it out, but sometimes it's in God's timing. And maybe you're supposed to just be praying for that person for a while. In a while could be a week, or it could be a year, or it could be longer. And you're supposed to pray for that person. And at some point you may get a time to talk about what happened or why you feel hurt or betrayed. But I think the habit of going to prayer is just such a good routine. And if we can create that idea in our brains where instead of being mad and sort of cursing them and giving them the glare or something worse, if we can quickly get over that pop of emotion and go into prayer, it calms us down. And then sometimes it feels like, well, maybe there is a purpose. Maybe that happened so I can be thinking about them in a different light. I heard somebody made the analogy of sometimes we get kind of shaken up or mixed together, almost like a salad dressing. I think of like an oil and vinegar that sits separate. And so sometimes you just have people you wouldn't mix with, right? For whatever reason, they're not kind of in your circles. You just have no places in life that you would necessarily come together. And so you're kind of like, oil and vinegar, and you're just sort of coexisting, but you wouldn't really mix. But then if you shake up the bottle of salad dressing, it completely mixes. And then you pour it out while it's mixed. You don't pour it out before it's mixed or you're going to get all oil. I think the oil floats. That could be wrong. You're just going to get this really oily salad. But if you mix it and shake it up before you pour it, you're going to have this perfect blend of the oil and vinegar. And I think sometimes God shakes us up, right? He kind of roughs us up and shakes us up and puts us with people that we wouldn't pray for these people. That person in your group or that person, maybe even at church, you're like, I just avoid that person. I don't care for them and I just avoid them. Or maybe there's someone in your play group with your kids and like, oh, that mom really annoys me, or that kid's mean to my kids. So I just kind of like oil and water. We sort of coexist in the same bubble together, but we don't mix. And then something happens, right? The kid's mean, or the mom says something, or you find out something's going on and it roughs you up and it forces you to mix with that person. And maybe it's just in prayer. Maybe you're like, oh, now I got to pray for this person and her kid. Maybe now I got to pray for this coworker. But it mixes you up. And then when you're poured out, it's that perfect flavoring because you've mixed yourself up with the word. You've mixed yourself up with truth. You've mixed yourself up with prayer. And it's got all those little herbs in it. And it's just got that perfect temperance. But if it just sat there, all the herbs would sit at the bottom and the oil and the vinegar, and it wouldn't taste good at all. But when we're shaken up or jostled, we have a better flavor and we're more useful. And nobody likes to think that way. I would really like to just sit on the bottom. I'd like to be a little herb just sitting on the bottom, unperturbed. But God roughs us up and he shakes our world upside down and back, and everything gets crazy and out of place. But I think he's creating a new flavor. And he's like, now I can use you. Now that you're not just sitting stagnant in layers, I've taken the truth the word you have hidden in your heart. I've taken that Bible study you're in or that thing you've spoken about with your friends, and I've pushed it up into your life. And now you have to use it. You can't just say, oh yeah, this is what I think. I think we should pray for our enemies, or we should show love and we should love those that do bad to us. And there's those verses about somebody asks for your jacket, you give it to them or whatever. I mean, I should have looked those up. Sorry. But that idea of giving people what they ask for, and people ask you to walk a mile with them and you walk two. I've always loved that verse. If someone's like, hey, can you help me with this? And not only do you do that, you go further. And what a picture of the gospel that is, of the Lord being shaken up and sending his son because he loves us so much, and Jesus pouring out his life in the actual physical, pouring out blood and water out of his body in death so we could have hope in life. If he's willing to do that, we should be willing to pour out prayer. Certainly, when somebody hurts us, abuses us, that we could pour out prayer for them, that we could swirl in all those biblical truths we know, all those things we're called to do, and that we could be poured out in prayer. And prayer is sacrifice. If you are a praying person, you know that. Prayer is sometimes hard. It's hard to find the time. It's hard to find the words. And it is a sacrifice to set time aside to pray for the ones we love, to pray over our churches and our schools, our government, let alone to make the time to pray for our enemies. I mean, that's a whole nother level. So not only did Jesus come to die for those that loved him, he came to die for those that hated him. And there is no greater example than Christ. And we certainly should be willing to sacrifice our time and our prayers to pray for people. And maybe it's further than prayer for some people. Maybe the Holy Spirit will say, you know what? You need to invite that person to coffee. Why are they so rude and surly? Maybe you need to find out why. Or you need to apologize to that person even though they started it. You need to try to connect with this person, maybe give them a gift even, like maybe buy them a little book or a little treat and say, hey, you were on my mind and I got you this, even though that person's been nothing but annoying to you. I don't know, you might be pushed to take it another layer even than prayer, but I think prayer's the minimum that's required. And maybe the next would be reaching out or even getting them a little something. And I think back to this little girl that she made him a Valentine. She sat down and took the time to make her enemy a Valentine. And God took the time to make humanity a Valentine in the shape of his son on a cross. And I thought I wouldn't get emotional this one, but there it is. Just next time somebody annoys you or hurts you, try to go to prayer and see if the Holy Spirit wants you to take it even further. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking with you again. I'm so glad you joined me today on the French Press. If you liked what you heard, you should follow me. That way you'll get all the latest episodes. And if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to rate the show. Also, if you'd like to follow my blog, The Demi-Tasse Drafts, I have a link below in the show notes. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Anytime you can leave a like, comment, reshare a post. All these help my ministry get more traction. The most important thing you can do is pray. I really appreciate all of your support. Thank you for sharing a French press with me today.